Hi and welcome. I'm John, the Counter Apologist, and I'm doing another reaction video. So I have this apologist. His name is Trent Horn. Actually, kind of like him. I think he is a good, honest interlocutor. He has debated the real atheology crew, especially specifically Ben Watkins. Very smart guy. I like his approach, and he's got a podcast. And I had it posted and shared it on my social media timeline, and it's this one question atheists can't answer, which is almost like a clickbaity thing, but he actually really has a great point here. So he starts it off by talking about the God of the Gaps objection, right? So everybody hopefully knows about the God of the Gaps. It's just like kind of like I don't know, therefore God, right? So like what caused the universe? I don't know, well therefore God, right? So you can't make that inference, right? So that's the idea of the God of the Gaps is like as science advances, the need to posit God to explain the holes in our scientific picture kind of ever recedes. And this is a often too quick used objection by atheists. I think like he mentions earlier in this podcast about how the Kalam gets dismissed this way. Well, no, like I don't say the Kalam is a god of the gaps really, right? Because it kind of lays out a strict logical premises about what would have to be a cause of things to begin to exist, right? The only thing where I think Kalam gets close to God of the gaps is where when you get to the first Planck second, if the apologist is trying to justify premise two that the universe began to exist, they would appeal to modern cosmology and basically in general relativity at the first Planck second, like 10 to the negative like 800 or some stupid number, right? The uh, general relativity breaks down. We don't know what happens, right? This is where the singularity idea comes from, even though singularities don't happen. And Craig and other apologists go, well, let's see, that proves that there was nothing before the first Planck second, right? And that is a unjustified assumption, right? And so, like, you might say that what happened before the first Planck second. If the theist says, "I don't know," therefore God had to do it, right? Because our theories break down. That would be a God of the gaps. But that's not really what the most sophisticated presentations and defenses of the Kalam will do. So don't overuse the God of the gaps. Sometimes it's valid, right? I think even Trent talks about how this is a problem that theists want to avoid. It is actually kind of a bad argument. But he says, though, if the atheist uses the God of the gaps objection to natural theology, then atheists have a question they can't answer, which is what would prove that God exists, right? And so he says you basically can end up making atheism as unfalsifiable as any religion would be. And he has a point here. And this is something I'd written about this a long time ago, basically talking about miracles, and we're going to get into. He actually specifically addresses, he doesn't credit me, he doesn't say that it was my thought experiment, but he talks about how one objection to his atheists can't answer this because God of the gaps is to say, well, God has to give us empirically verifiable miracles. And he mentions my Catholic priests and only Catholic priests can turn water into wine. So I'm just going to switch to his video. I'm going to play about a minute. It is on 1.5 speed. Sorry, you sound a little funny, Trent, but I want to play this in its entirety here to let you hear his way he addresses this thought experiment.
The argument commits. Now, let me address a few objections to this argument that I'm offering. One objection is that theists, all they have to do to prove God exists is just offer repeatable, testable predictions of the God hypothesis, and that would prove God exists. This is basically saying, well, if you can scientifically prove God exists, then atheists would change their minds. But what is science? Like, what is science? Science is the search for natural explanations of observed phenomena. If we could show something was testable, predictable part of our world, whatever effect that might be, like let's say only Catholic priests can change water into wine when they say certain words. Say we do show that. Why wouldn't we conclude this is just an unexplained part of nature? This objection is basically saying, I'll believe a supernatural being exists if you can prove it is a regular part of the natural world that we observe. But that's a contradiction. You're saying that you'll believe in the supernatural when you can show me it is a part of nature because science provides natural explanations for the things that we observe. The point is you cannot prove God exists with science. Science studies material causes, effects, and forces. God's existence is something you would demonstrate philosophically, like other immaterial things you would demonstrate.
All right, so we're just gonna cut back to just me. I hope. There we go. So here's some problems with Trent's construal of my thought experiment and why science would start proving this. Now, I do agree that atheists have to be careful, right? And you can make naturalism or atheism just as unfalsifiable as um, theism or certain religions would be. And this is where I think this actually counts in favor of the atheistic argument in this case because, right, one of the things people talk about, apologists will talk about, the reason you don't get these cool verifiable miracles is that God doesn't want to force belief. God wants us to choose to believe, sort of. And so the idea is that even if you have a miracle, why would I not include, like, a Catholic priest only can turn water into wine by consecrating a Eucharist, and only Catholic priests can do this. Um, then why wouldn't we conclude this is just a natural phenomenon, right? And it is a logically consistent, logically possible instance where our understanding of the laws of nature are incomplete or wrong, and that there's a natural explanation for that. Perhaps there's some advanced technology that aliens are using and they're monitoring the whole planet and they can turn water into wine in some way that we just don't understand technologically. And maybe we never will understand technologically how they do it. And, so there actually is no God, but they just want us to believe Catholicism is true for a lark or whatever manipulative things that they want to do to us. But that seems far less likely than what we would infer in such a situation. I think Trent gets it wrong here, and he says, "Well, you're making the supernatural part of the natural, right? This is, you do need to have a natural order that gets subverted in the case of a miracle to show that a miracle happens." Well, the problem with this is that science helps establish that a miracle occurred. We know how water behaves, how molecules behave, atoms, quantum field theory is so incredibly well established empirically in terms of how things behave and the kind of energy that would be required to instantaneously transform water into wine, right, without adding some kind of reagent or something, let alone speaking words. Speaking words can transform water into wine? Like that, it takes some expenditure of energy to make the transformation occur. So the thing is, we have a very well understood way of how nature actually is, and this would be, in the case of a God existing, a miracle. Something, I don't want to call it magic, but like something like we kind of get to capture the magic of the moment, or you get to capture the miracle itself in a repeatable, verifiable way. And so the way science does this is it doesn't make God part of the natural world. It uses our understanding of the natural world and the controlled repeatability of the experiments we could run, because every time a Catholic priest, and only Catholic priests can do this, would allow us to eliminate all other known natural causes from the situation. This is why I carefully selected this thought experiment when I did my countering the resurrection video. All right, because you would allow, we could do other we could take non-Catholic Christians, we could take non-ordained priests, we could take a priest right before they take their like last vow, whatever it is that they do, and then like be like run a mass, and then it fails, and then they take their vows, and then they run a mass, and then they get the conversion, right? And we do this in controlled conditions. We control their clothes. We do all sorts of stuff, right? We take people in the same getup. We take the clothes off a priest that just did it, put it on another one, another person who's a Christian, who's not, or a Hindu, and no other religion could do this. And the only thing that's left, science will make it such that the only thing that will be left as a difference between the people who are doing the miracle versus not able to do the miracle in the exact same situations with the exact same sorts of things, would be their beliefs. Are they, and going through the ordination of being a Catholic priest? You could have somebody shadow the guy going through his seminary to become ordained the entire time. You could have him be under complete observation, right? And it would still work, right? Because there's nothing physical happening there. Because if there is nothing physical happening that causes the change, we won't be able to find it. Science will be able to demonstrate that physically. And yes, you are then left in that case of saying, okay, either in any miracle, demonstrating anything. You could say either my understanding of the laws of nature are incorrect or a miracle has happened. Something supernatural has occurred, right? And by making the supernatural's interaction with the physical repeatable and verifiable, it will give us the best amount of evidence to conclude that a miracle has occurred. And so, because an atheist would have a logical escape hatch, just like a young earth creationist has a logical escape hatch, or a flat earther has a logical escape hatch. You could just say, well, God created the universe, with the appearance of age, or the evidence that we have for the round earth is fake, right? And misinterpret all sorts of stuff. I mean, this is a thing that has spread. It's not major, it's not widespread, but it's spread enough that you could say, well, God wouldn't be forcing a belief by providing this kind of evidence, but it would be fringe, right? Just like young earth creationism, right? It would just be this really weird thing that is looked at and kind of dismissed in society. It's just like, oh, get away, right? Like, I'm not going to hire you if you start spouting like the earth is 6,000 years old and I'm trying to hire you for a position that involves the use of physics or something like that. So the point is that science would get us to the best possible place we could ever be to make the philosophical judgment of, are my understandings of the laws of nature incorrect, or did a miracle happen? And I don't think Trent wants to sign up and say that the resurrection of Jesus does not prove that he is the Son of God, right? Because ultimately, that is the basis for his faith, is that Jesus was risen from the dead and was witnessed by the apostles, who then told everyone about it, and that the apostles would not have been wrong if Jesus didn't rise from the dead to just move on and be like, well, I guess he was a false Messiah, right? If the proof of the Messiah was in the raising. So you could say the apostles could even go in the same thing. Well, then maybe my understanding of how the laws of nature work. Maybe there's some natural force that rose this guy from the dead specifically, and he's not the Messiah, right? But no, they saw the risen body supposedly, and then they believed, because ultimately, yes, there's a philosophical argument there, but you're eliminating all of the best other natural explanations by having this scenario. And that's why I chose it as an example, and that's why I think it is a solid answer to your question that you think atheists can't answer. So appreciate the engagement. Call me out next time if you use my thought experiment. It would be nice. Thanks for watching. Bye.